Hello everybody, hope you're doing well. Look, I've got with me today, I've got Paul and I've got Sophie.
Hello.
Feel like I'm spoiled today. Obviously, if you haven't known, Paul's obviously featured in a mini video, and obviously Sophie has also. But the relationship between them two, compared to me, is slightly different. One of them I happen to be going out with, one of them I wish I went out with.
He had his chance.
Anyway, welcome to Phoenix History, everybody. We've got a special permission visit today. We are in Dover, and more importantly, the National Trust have given us exclusive access to check out Wanstone Battery, and also the heavy anti-aircraft battery associated with it. So two things we are going to be doing. However, on this video, it will just be Wanstone Battery, and we are going to be guided around, and we are very spoilt today, I think, and hopefully you are by watching it as well. So stay along. I don't think there's going to be much of us. We'll be in the background and let Rich do his wonderful talking, but hopefully you enjoy it. And massive thanks to National Trust for genuine exclusive access. It's like this is a remarkable sort of opportunity that we've had. So we will of course see you on the other side. Let's go, guys. Come on.
So, hi everybody, welcome to Wanstone Gun Battery. Here at Wanstone we had two 15-inch guns. They were nicknamed during the war. One was called Jane, the other one was called Clem. And we're at Clem. It was named after the Deputy Prime Minister of the day, Clement Attlee. The Clem gun itself was a 15-inch gun. It had a range of approximately 26 miles. And it was intended primarily for anti-shipping duty, although later on in the war, the gun provided cover for the Canadian regiments as they moved in after D-Day and travelled across France in a northeast direction. We're just entering one of the shell magazines here at Clem now. The shells weighed 1,980 pounds or about 900 kilograms. The shells themselves were not cartridge shells, so the gun would fire the entire shell. The shells were propelled by a substance called cordite, which was stored in the room to our right. The cordite was kept in silk bags, silk because it burned with very little residue and enabled the gun to fire and refire more rapidly. The shells were so heavy they couldn't be lifted manually, and so in each of the magazines there was an overhead crane that ran on rails supported by the beams that you can see projecting from the walls of both sides of the magazine. The remains of one of the support rails can actually be seen at the far end. It's the I-beam there buried into the wall. And on top of that I-beam would have been a small piece of railway line, and on that would run the overhead crane. The crane would lift the shells then using a scissor type lifting arrangement onto a small trolley, and that would be powered by a small diesel truck, and then the shell would be taken out then and taken for loading onto the gun. The shells were propelled, as we said, by cordite. It was the propellant of the day. And the cordite was stored separately from the shells in this smaller storeroom. You can see here the room is double skinned. We have air bricks here to ventilate the double skin. This is all around ensuring that the cordite stayed dry and ready for use. And we can see up in the roof here the massive ventilation ducts that would have taken air out of the storeroom. We can still see the remains of some of the old light fittings on the walls here. These haven't been touched for probably in excess of 60 years. You're now inside the crew shelter for gun Clem here at Wanstone. This was quite amazing in that we found it still locked when we arrived in 2017. The original window shutters and door can still be seen propped up against the wall, and the wooden brackets that you see on the wall there are the rifle stands, still there and still intact. You'll see on the wall just above the rifle stands there the old electrical fuse box and isolator there, still in the on position. And also fascinating with this room was the fact that we found the old metal sash windows still intact. A couple of broken panes in this one, but in the other window there, it's completely unbroken. Heating in here was done by two stoves, probably coal stoves. And the fire surround there can be seen along with some of the remains of the flue and a few broken bits from the actual stove itself. The chimney would have exited the room just above there. There would have been one stove at this end of the room and another stove at the other. So here we're outside the crew shelter at Clem now, and I'm standing in between two concrete bases. The actual bases themselves are around about 30 centimetres down in all this leaf mulch, and on these bases would have been two quite large Nissen huts, and that would have been the sleeping accommodation for the troops here manning the gun at Clem. So I'm standing now right in the middle of the Clem gun emplacement. We haven't excavated this emplacement to the extent that we have at Jane, principally because there was a lot more material to excavate here, and the Clem emplacement is identical to the Jane emplacement anyway. We have excavated though down to gun ring level, and we can see the outline of the gun ring there, the beautiful semicircular shape there. Within that would have been the training rail and then the breech pit, and I'm standing now almost certainly right above where the pintle would have been for the gun to rotate upon. The rest of the emplacement, unfortunately, behind this huge bank, The whole emplacement was filled in during the 1960s and early 1970s, and to remove all this overburden here would cost a colossal sum of money and would also disturb the integrity of the land behind it. This is the compressor room at Clem. Compressed air was used to blow the barrel of the gun through after the gun had been fired. The reason for doing that is that although the silk bags for the cordite burned to very little residue, some burning particles would remain, and if further cordite was then loaded on top of a burning particle, then that clearly could cause quite a nasty explosion. So the compressed air was generated in here. There would have been an electric compressor mounted on the floor right here, and the compressed air then would be led out to the gun and used from the breech. This is what they called the lamp room for Clem. In practice, yes, lamps would have been stored in here for use out on the gun battery if power supply failed and so on. But almost certainly here would have been the air receiver for the compressed air. So that would have been mounted on these two rails.
So dual purpose actually then in this instance. Yeah.
Indeed, yes.
And so the cable's obviously running.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cables and pipes and things like that running through.
Well, you can see the shadow of the.
Yeah. Again, there's your cable. You see, coming through from there. It obviously went in as an afterthought. You can actually see right the way through that one.
Brilliant.
Building to my right here is the gun store at Clem. This was one of the key differences between Jane and Clem, in that with Jane, the three buildings, the compressor room, the lamp room and the gun store, they were all adjoined. With Clem, the compressor room and lamp room were separate to the gun store. You can probably make out behind me an earth bank, and that was the profile of the covering up of this site, which extended all the way through to the gun pit and beyond. So this building was completely invisible until February of 2024, when we came along, we held an archaeological dig here and we exposed the building for the first time in probably 60 years. The structure here is the ready use locker for the gun here at Clem. The shells would be stored horizontally inside the locker until they're required actually on the gun just behind me here. The concrete column that you see over here was to support the camouflage netting. The British guns here didn't rely, like the German guns, on massive reinforced concrete emplacement covers. Here we use simple camouflaging techniques. Ironically, the guns were never taken out by the German weapons. gun emplacement. They should have finished their lunch break. So welcome to the Jane gun emplacement here. This is the emplacement, again part of the Wanstone Battery. This is the emplacement that we excavated in July of 2022. We can see here the massive reinforced concrete gun pintle. So on this, where the centre of the gun would have pivoted. So in the middle of the hole here, we would have had a turntable with rollers, and that would have allowed the gun then to swivel around its full axis. Beyond the pintle is the breech pit. That allowed the breech of the gun to drop down as the barrel of the gun was elevated. And beyond the breech pit, we have the remains of the training rail. The training rail was a series of rails that ran again around the curvature of the pit, and those rails supported the back end of the gun as it was being rotated. So this is the pintle for the Jane gun emplacement. When we arrived on site, the breech pit was completely filled in. The site was very heavily overgrown, and all that could be seen of the gun emplacement was in fact a small section of this concrete which was exposed, and we can still see where the moss was growing on it. But that was the only visible part of this huge gun emplacement. The guns here carried on in service for most of the war, and they did support the Canadian regiments, as we said earlier. But by September of 1944, the guns had been fired so many times that the barrels had worn and they were no longer able to reach the coast of northern France. The guns were then taken out of service. The guns remained in place until 1957, when the decision was taken to remove the guns. Unlike so many of the other guns around here, the barrels here were so big that it was decided that they couldn't be recovered, and they were actually cut up in situ by oxyacetylene cutting gear. And the remains of that cutting operation can still be seen down in the breech pit here. And you can see there the iron residue. That's not soil, it is actually iron spelter. And in the middle of it, you'll see buried one of the steel ropes that they used to lift the sections of the gun, each of which weighed approximately 20 tons. One of the key differences between the emplacements Clem and Jane are these three buildings that we have alongside us here. With Clem, the compressor room and the lamp room were separate to the gun store. With Jane, the rooms were adjoined. Or perhaps not quite adjoined. They were adjoined by a simple brick fascia, because behind this brickwork here is earth. The rooms were kept separate. We're not entirely sure why. So we're standing now on the two Nissen hut bases outside the crew shelter at Jane. These would be the accommodation for the soldiers manning the gun, their immediate accommodation. There was other accommodation provided a little way away from here. Now, when we found the site, it didn't look anything like this at all. The whole of this area had been given over to agriculture. And if we look at the wall, the front wall of the crew shelter here, you can probably make out a change in colour near to the top level of the windows and the door. And that was actually the soil level when we discovered the site in 2017. During our excavations, we restored the original wartime bunding back and uncovered the Nissen hut bases, and that's what you see today. So we're inside the crew shelter at Jane now. The original paint is still on the walls, and we can see the shelving, the high-level shelving here, still in place from the wartime installation. And on that, the shelving is still supporting some of our artefacts. The telephone exchange that you see in the background there is not original to this site. It was one that was gifted to us by a donor. But this crew shelter, this will be the hub of the operation effectively here. The orders to fire and the orders to service the gun, that would all be given from this room.
Well, everybody, I've been quite quiet on this video today, which you need to change for everybody. So you might like it. Thank you so much to Rich for just being incredible, for showing us around. Yeah, absolutely, mate. Thank you so much. Obviously, part of National Trust, and we want to say massive thanks to John for arranging it as well, and just National Trust in general for doing such a fantastic job of what's been going on here. Hopefully, this video is giving you the scale, and obviously, we know now that at the moment, as it stands, how it's going to be set out eventually. Hopefully I'm not saying anything at the moment. No. We're really lucky to be at this phase of how it's all turning out, because it's only been 2 years roughly since most of it's been uncovered, and obviously as you the audience have been checking out how it's come about, really, which is fantastic. We've all enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Sophie. Thank you so much, Paul, for joining and taking lots of photos. Feel free to check out the links below for both of their Instagrams. Obviously, Soph's one is related to Phoenix history, as we know, Phoenix in Flower, and obviously Paul's is his own separate and beautiful thing to do with history as well, obviously coinciding with Phoenix history. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Feel free also to check out Pooh Battery that I explored a fair few years ago now, and also to check out the ammunition stores as part of the railway line that links up to the supergun batteries as well. So I'll put that there. Lots of links for everybody to check out. I think actually going to be quite sport with the history. Massive thanks again, Rich. Thank you so much. Anything you want to say before we part?
Well, it's been a great pleasure hosting you here today. And yes, if you ever wish to come back and do some more work with us, we'd be very pleased to see you.
And on that note, we're not actually done yet. You're going to have to wait, because further up the road, we've got a little treat for you, which is obviously something that you've seen on my channel lots of, which is heavy anti-aircraft batteries. And Rich is going to kindly guide us through those as well. So stay tuned for another video coming up very soon. But on behalf of us, thank you so much for watching. Take care, everybody. Because history matters, we can safely say history matters on this. Come on, let's be important. And hopefully this is going to inspire generations and generations to come and visit this long after when we are here, which is going to be memories for this wonderful place as a time capture ourselves. Take care, everybody, and we'll, of course, see you all very soon. Ready? Bye, everybody. Bye. Bye.